Hello friends, so today I am going to tell a story about Green Island. Can Mrs. May and the children save the otters and the sea life when some men dumped toxic waste on the Green Island? Mr. Johnson took his class away for a week. They went to a big house called Seabay House. Mrs. May went too. The children were excited. Seabay House was near the sea, and there were a lot of interesting things to do. Everyone unloaded the bus. Some of these bags and cases are heavy, said Mr. Johnson. We are only here for a week. Mrs. May found a toothbrush. Whose toothbrush is this? She asked. Oh dear, said Biff, I think it's mine. Mr. Johnson showed the boys their room. You will be sleeping in here, he said. I want the top bunk, shouted Chip. No, I want the top bunk, shouted Will. Mr. Johnson tossed a coin. Heads or tails, he said. The other day they went for a visit. Mr. Johnson gave the children a map. Then he took the children for a long walk. After a while they stopped for a rest. The children looked at their maps. Mr. Johnson showed them the places they could see. Your map's upside down, Biff, said Wilf. Nadim pointed to a little island out at the sea. What's that island called? He asked. Look on your map, said Mr. Johnson. Who can tell me what the island is called? Chip and Anina knew. It's called Green Island, they said. Everyone was hungry after the long walk. When they get back, it was time for supper. The children served the food and then they helped wash up. I don't like washing up at home, said Wilf, but it's fun washing up here. The next day, the children did a beach study. Some children worked with Mr. Johnson. They made squares on the beach and looked everything in each square. Biff found a shell with crab inside it. It's called hermit crab, she said. Some children worked with Mrs. May. They looked carefully in all the rock pools. Nadim and Wilf caught a large crab. Look at this, they called. Mrs. May showed them how to hold the crab. We will look at it, then we will let it go, she said. Chip and Anina found a seagull. It could not fly. Oh dear, said Mr. Johnson. It can't fly because it has oil on its feathers. Oil is hard to get off. So be careful, everyone. Mind you don't get oil on you. How do we get the oil off the seagull? Asked Chip. Oil is terrible stuff, said Mrs. Honey. You can see what it does to animals and birds if it spills into the sea. It is terrible, said Mrs. May. I am having trouble getting it off, Chip and Anina. I feel really sorry for the seagull, said Chip. What will happen to the seagull? Asked Wilf. Its feather will be damaged, said Mrs. Honey. So first we will clean the oil off, then we will look after it for a week or two. It has to get strong again and its feathers have to get better, then we will let it go. Mrs. Honey looked after all kinds of animals. She showed the children an otter. Then she gave it some fish. She is a sea otter, she said. I call her Fiona. She was hurt by a boat. Now she is better. I am going to let her go. Sea otter live on a green island, said Mrs. Honey. If you like, you can come to this island with me and watch me let Fiona go. Mrs. Honey had a boat. There is room for everyone, she said. If we are lucky, we may see some more sea otters. The children went across to Green Island in the boats. Mrs. Honey stopped a little way from the island. The children looked carefully. Suddenly, Anina pointed to some rocks. I can see another otter, she said. Look, everyone. There aren't many sea otters left, said Mrs. May, so that was a wonderful thing to see. Mrs. Honey let Fiona go. The otter dived into the sea and swam towards the rocks. Will Fiona be all right? Asked Wilf. I hope so, said Mrs. Honey. Mrs. Honey took the boat to the other side of the island. You can get out and explore, she said. If you keep quiet, you will see all kind of interesting seabirds. The children jumped out of the boat and went to look around the island. The children saw a small cave. They ran to see it. I wonder if it is rare in it, called Wolf. Maybe it's a secret tunnel, said Nadim. Maybe it leads to a secret computer base. But when they got to the cave, they found something else. In the cave, there were some drums. I don't like the look of this, said Mrs. Honey. These drums have been dumped on Green Island. They are full of toxic waste. Keep away from them, everyone, said Mr. Johnson. Why would anyone want to dump them here? Asked Biff. It's hard to get rid of toxic waste, said Mrs. May. It costs a lot of money to do it safely, so people dump it. We should tell the police, said Mr. Johnson. These drums can't stay here, said Mrs. Honey. They could do a lot of harm to the wildlife. Suddenly, Chip and Wilf ran up to Mr. Johnson. There is a boat coming to the island, said Chip. There are 4 people on it. I don't like the sound of this, said Mr. Johnson. Keep out of the sight, everyone, said Mrs. Honey. I want to see what these people are doing. The boat stopped at the island and 4 people got out. They lifted some drums out of the boat and began to carry them towards the cave. They are dumping more waste on the island, said Mrs. Honey. I want everyone to run back to my boat. Don't make sound. I have an idea. The children did what Mrs. Honey told them. They ran to the boat with Mrs. May and climbed in. I hope the boat will start, said Mrs. May. If it does not, I don't know what we shall do. Do you think those people are dangerous? Asked Chip. Wilf and Chip pushed the boat out with the oars and Mrs. May started the engine. So far so good, said Mrs. May. Let's hope Mrs. Honey's ideas works. I hope Mrs. Honey and Mr. Johnson will be alright, said Wilf. Mrs. Honey's idea worked. She and Mr. Johnson had taken the other boat. The other people could not get off the island without it. Hooray! Shouted the children. They won't get off Green Island unless they swim all the way back. What are you doing with our boat? Shouted a man. Bring it back. I will get I will get the police to bring it back, shouted Mrs. Honey. You can tell them why you dumped the toxic waste on Green Island. Grrr, said the man. The police took the people off the island. Taking their boats was a brilliant idea, said Mr. Johnson. I am glad we caught them, said Mrs. Honey. And I am glad you are with me. I could not have taken their boats by myself. What an adventure, said Mrs. May. Look at those drums of toxic waste, said Wilf. I can't think why people would dump them where they could not do so much harm. I am glad the otter will be safe on the island now, said Anina. At the end of the week, there was a party. Mrs. May played her guitar and everyone sang songs. Mrs. Honey came. She told the children stories about some of the animals she had looked after. But you have the best story to tell, she said. It is not every school trip that becomes famous. A photographer came. She made everyone stand in a group. Then she took a photograph. We are going to be in newspaper, said Wilf. We are going to be famous. I have never been famous before, said Chip. I wonder what it feels like. The next day, the story of Green Island was in the newspaper. The children were excited. I am going to buy 3 newspapers, said Chip. One for me, one for mom and dad, and one for Gran. Now I am famous. I don't feel any different, said Wilf.